Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us today on this seventh episode of the SIG Download. I am Trisha Howard, aka Trisha Kicks Sass, and I am so excited to have the man, the myth, the legend, Steve Winterfeld on with me today. Hey, Steve.
All of that stuff is true in my own mind. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself really quick so these people can understand why I am so excited to have you on the show.
Certainly. My name's Steve Winterfeld. I'm the advisory CISO here. Previously, I was a CISO for Nordstrom Bank. My wife desperately misses that discount. Went over to Charles Schwab, and now I'm here helping with what we should be doing next to help solve problems for customers.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. So I'm very excited. We have a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to jump right in because it was a busy month per usual here in security. So let's spring on in, shall we?
Oh,
Um, I know. I had to do at least one. To do at least one. I'm going to start off actually with a good story, which we don't often get in security. This was a real story that came out of our Akamai Hunt team, which is our proactive threat hunting and response team, was managing a customer and ended up finding a custom script of theirs that had been accidentally uploaded into the internet with plain text domain credentials. It is a good story. We found it and were able to remediate before it was particularly bad. But I thought it was a really interesting story because it really touches on the human element. And I wanted to mention this one particularly because you're here, Steve. I know that this is something very near and dear to your heart. So what were your thoughts on the whole story and the investigation and all of that?
well, first, I always laugh because this made me think of have I been pwned site. So I went out and looked, and my personal email has been pwned at least 7 times. Uh,
Only
this
seven.
this is this is interesting. Whenever I think of credentials, it's a shared risk. Um, they can lose it. I can use poor credentials. Um, I really think this is where the individual needs to own their own security. They need to turn on their own MFA. They need to go out and have, a junk password for things with no risk, but a series of secure passwords and a password manager for things they care about, their finance, their health, that kind of thing.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. Make people care about it and make it personal, and they will care. And it's a huge uh, talking point of mine. So very, very good point. All right. So jumping into something that's not super great, the XZ Utils backdoor. This was a big story. If you are not aware of it, this was a very long-term play. The threat actor was committing to this code for about 2 years, and we're actually making up fake requests, making fake accounts and fake requests. This is some social engineering on a major scale for a very long term for a very long time, and ended up getting privileges. And what was really particular, the reason it was so successful for as long as it was to remain unhidden or to remain hidden, sorry, is that they were only updating these like backdoor things in the like off releases that didn't have as much attention. So this is a whole level of social engineering that goes beyond just right making fake accounts and doing this. This was a really well thought out and careful situation. And thank you so much for discovering it, researchers, because holy moly, what a beast this could have been.
Yeah, I always struggle with this. How much of my resource do I put into the insider threat?
Yeah.
Um, you know, it is so devastating when it happens. But it's actually starting to shift because I'm now getting a philosophy of they're going to get inside. So whether it's insider or the threat that got inside, you need to minimize dwell time. But a huge, call out to that. On a personal note, if anybody is out there starting to build fake identities, make sure to tell your wife why you have burner phones in a drawer. So one day she doesn't come up and ask why I have a bunch of burner phones.
Wow, yeah, that is what a practical tip that is for anybody who's looking to get into red teaming. There you go. Good one. Oh, I like that. Um, I'll put that in the show notes. It's, next is a one that is near and dear to my heart. I've talked about it so many times, varying aspects of it. Ben Barnea, researcher here at Akamai, found yet another bypass to the infamous the infamous critical vulnerability within Outlook that was discovered and made public, or sorry, was made public March of 2023, where the attacker could send a custom sound file and it turned into a remote path. This time, if you have followed our saga on this, there was the initial vulnerability, which was then patched. There was a bypass discovered to that. Then there was a second bypass that was discovered, and that one had to be chained together. This is now the third one. This one is on its own now. The vulnerability lies within crack URL file, so that's a really good read, especially if you've been following the saga. It's a nice little end to the trilogy. Next, really quickly, if you haven't seen this, there was a big critical injection vulnerability discovered within Palo Alto Networks OS. So make sure that you have patched that out. And next, I'm really excited to get your thoughts on this one, Steve. So be ready. There was speaking of credentials, there was a major breach of Roku announced, with over 576,000 accounts were affected by this, and it was via credential stuffing was how this was going on. So again, here we are with passwords again.
Well, the first thing that upsets me is that, when you hack streaming, it's called piracy. We ended up with cyber and they ended up with piracy. It just doesn't seem fair. So
Yeah,
much
that's
cooler.
right. And they get the ships, they get the
So
ships.
much cooler. Credential stuffing is interesting. I love my dad, uses the same password for everything, and it's the town he lives in and a number. It's not sophisticated.
Right.
This again goes back to ownership and teaching people about risk, uh, and really that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. This is where you need to teach the culture of understanding risk and what people are doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And mentioning where their where the line is between their version of risk and the company's risk, right? Because I think it's very common for somebody who doesn't live in this world to just assume that the company's going to take care of it, and that's just not always the case, right? So you really do have to make sure that
It
you're
is
taking care of yourself.
it's a shared responsibility. I
Yep.
mean, just like with your credit card, it's a shared
Yep.
responsibility.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I'm moving quickly because our very last story, I imagine you and I are going to have a lot to talk about. So this is the second to last one, and this is the one that I hundo p like nerded out the most about. And this was the Cobalt letters email or attack that was discovered. It is a new email threat that takes place in the HTML headers. The threat actor can actually edit the headers for things to appear or disappear based on whether it has been forwarded. So an actual story could be that a boss, money manager of some sort, forwards an email to the employee. The employee says, "Oh, this looks kind of weird. I don't know. We don't usually send wires of money for this amount," right? So they call up their boss because they are responsible. They've done the culture of security, and they call in and say, "Yeah, did you actually send this to me? Because it seems kind of not real." And the boss says, "No, it's totally legit. Came from the customer, what have you." And the reality was it is entirely fake. How does that happen? And it's because of that, right? The headers can be changed. This is wild, because when we talk about security awareness, this kind of changes some of the things that we talk about, right? Like now these people are doing the things that they are supposed to, being responsible. And now the threat actors have found ways around that too. So woof.
Yeah, this is interesting. Have you ever seen the report the FBI puts out from IC3 on the most profitable businesses to be in as a cyber criminal?
Oh, actually, no, I don't think I have.
So it says, business email compromise is always in the top three.
Yep.
Ransomware is down in the 20s. That's for total amount of money made in the criminal ecosystem. And so it's a great report as far as understanding that. But there are two things that can really impact your company. The first is business email compromise. Companies, 7, 10 years ago, maybe 5 companies had gone out of business because of the cyber event. Now, because of business email compromise, taking all their money, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their employees, or ransomware shutting people down for a couple weeks with encryption. There's over 100 companies that have gone out of business. So this is a process. We defend against business email compromise with processes and ransomware, obviously through stuff like segmentation to minimize the impact. But this is a great story for how sophisticated the threat is getting.
Yes, yes, it is. It's no longer only the big organizations and nation states are the only sophisticated ones. No, 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 no. We're getting pretty day to day. Our persons are being affected by these. So yeah, it's real. It is real. And speaking of sophistication and long game, we have reached our final discussion today, which I imagine is going to fill up the rest of our time, which is the saga of Change Healthcare's ransomware scandal. So if you are not, or scandal, what kind of word is that? Situation. If you are not familiar with how this has gone on, they have paid as of, or sorry, when it first came out, they paid $22 million in a ransom to the ransomware group that got them. 2 months after that, which was roughly around March 31st, it was point out that they had spent roughly $872 million on trying to remediate this. These are insurmountable amounts of money, right? That was as of March 31st. The most recent update to this, which has gone out in the last month or so, is that the ransomware group is now selling off the data that they stole. So not only have they gotten their money, they are now selling off the very, very personal information, the only information that cannot change, which is health information. So I don't have to tell any of you listening to this how important PII is and how valuable it is. But my goodness, this is such a huge example of the magnitude that these events can have, right? And how long they can go.
Yeah, and it's less about any one company. It's never about the company, and they've done the right things.
Oh
It's
yeah.
more about the example that we can use to do lessons learned. But this one kind of strikes me because lately I've been talking to my peers a lot about the new SEC guidance. And it says, a cyber event can now be material.
Mm,
Now, material is a financial word, and it's interesting. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I don't know that you can be in this field if you're not willing to learn about blockchain, and then about large language models, and then about uh,
yep.
DevSecOps. And so I recently did a course on reading and understanding financial statements because what is a material event? That's a financial statement that what would I as an investor in any company want to know if they had a cyber incident? And so there's things called a 10K, which is your annual financial report, and then there's an 8K, which is a special interim report of an event. And so, the hospital here had to put out an 8K about this incident.
Hmm.
And I've read a bunch of these. Some will say, okay, this is how much we're spending on the breach. This is how much our cyber insurance paid. This is where we are in the investigation. This is how many class action lawsuits we've had filed against us so far. Um, but those are the things that an investor wants to know about.
Yeah, absolutely, because it affects their money, right? I mean, like literally, why are they investing? Yeah, yeah, it is wild. And whenever we were discussing this before, you brought up a really good point that this 8K in this example is why we know so much, right? So it's a very good point. Also, the lifelong learner stuff, taking the class on financial statements, that's a wonderful example of like a human thing that can really help you in cybersecurity. And if you've been watching the show at all, you'll know that I love to talk about that too. So very, very good points. Very good points. Um, absolutely. Anything else on that before we kick it off? Because we're already at time. Can you believe
No,
it?
I would just say that, you can't talk about risk if you don't understand the finances. Make sure that leg of your skills is strong.
Yeah, there's a reason that chief risks officers are legal or financial, right? You know what I mean? There's a reason for it. Um, All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Steve. This was I knew it was going to be a great time. It always is whenever I'm chatting with you. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. We're already at time. Can't wait to see you for our next time. Thank you for joining us here. Our next episode is going to be on May 21st, and I'm going to have Mike Salvatore on with me. He's our lead of Infection Monkeys, so our open source adversary emulation platform. If you're not familiar, you should check that out before the next episode. All of the things we discuss are in the attachments tab of this webinar. You can also find out what SIG has been up to on our security intelligence group page on akamai.com. You can see all of our recent blogs and SOTIs coming out of our team. And make sure you bookmark this page so that you can never miss a episode of the monthly threat brief. We want to hear from you. So if you had something that you liked, maybe a joke you'd wish I'd said, I don't know, drop it into our email, brighttalk@akamai.com. Would love to hear any and every thought that you've got. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us, and have a wonderful evening, y'all, or day, wherever you're at. Cybernara.